Morning, everyone, and welcome to Medical Festival Asia. And today's session on entrepreneurial startups, what are funding organizations looking for? With us today, we have Dr. Timothy Loh, Board of Directors at Therapeutic Hospital and Head of Healthcare Investments at Pavilion Capital, to really share his insights on investing in young growth firms and how it is as much about the ideas, product, and growth metrics as it is about the team running the firm and the qualities and what to look for there as well. We'll be looking specifically how to balance fit, founder, and company. Prior to this session, we've actually seen Golden Gate Ventures really share their investment thesis in terms of per capita and data side. This will provide additional insights into just how an investor views the team as well. So on that note, Dr. Timothy, it is an absolute pleasure to have you share your insights, and I hand over the floor to you. And thank you again to everyone tuning in for this session.
Thank you, Varun.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Varun. It's a great pleasure for me to be on this platform today to share with you the entrepreneurism, how an investor looks at a company when a company is presenting to the investor. I come from Pavilion Capital and I head up the healthcare investment. So just as an example, this is a company. I'm going to give you a case study. So this is a company called Therapeutics, right? It's computationally designed de novo proteins to treat NASH and cancer, as well as autoimmune diseases. Right, so this case study, I have to put a disclaimer. So this is a hypothetical company meant to illustrate how venture investors evaluate biotech startups, right? So it is a hypothetical company, and we will use this case study to see how a startup presents and what are the shortcomings, what are the strengths, and what are investors actually looking for when a startup company presents to the investor. So the de novo protein from this company, they are best in class attributes. The platform for design of de novo synthetic proteins. This is a robust platform for computationally designed de novo therapeutic proteins. It is non-immunogenic, it is stable, it is highly selective, and it has a very long half-life compared to the other competitors out there. Building pipeline of de novo cytokines and growth factors for NASH, for cancer, and for autoimmune diseases. NASH is a liver disease. It means nonalcoholic steatohepatitis. The potential best-in-class NASH asset that this company has is NFX101. It is a computationally designed de novo FGF hormone. It has metabolic effects of FGF21 and bile acid effects of FGF19. The half-life is longer than FGF19 analogs, potentially enabling a once-weekly dosing, right? The first in-man dosing has happened in the first quarter of 2020. The proteins with functionality beyond what is found in nature. So this protein is developed with a very robust structural model of receptors as well as ligands. It is computationally designed, right? Or we can say in silico design. It is a protein topology to achieve desired characteristics with selectivity, potency, stability, and a longer half-life. It is optimized primarily and it is a redesigned protein. Results is a stable, non-immunogenic, selective, highly potent protein with favorable PK characteristics. PK stands for pharmacokinetics. Just a brief overview of NASH. NASH stands for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, right? If you look at the NAFLD is on the left side is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There are 67 million US patients, just the US alone. And out of this 67 million, there are 16 million NASH patients. And NASH eventually leads to cirrhosis. So 1 million US cirrhotic patients a year. So NASH can progress to liver failure, to cancer, and to death. This leads to a lot of liver transplant being done. And currently, there are no approved therapies for NASH. So how is the effectiveness of NASH treatments measured? It's measured via NASH, or rather NAS score. This measures the liver fat, or steatosis, liver inflammation, liver cell ballooning. We can measure fibrosis, which causes scarring of the liver, and also metabolic biomarkers, right, which is blood glucose, insulin, cholesterol, fatty acids, and also liver function like the liver enzymes of ALT and AST. Busy slide, but just to show you the pathogenesis of NASH. All right, so NASH leads to, as I said, inflammation, liver fibrosis, and cirrhosis, finally. The therapeutic targets and the drugs approved and under development for NASH. So if you look at the metabolism, which is the steatosis, the drugs that has been approved and also under development are the PPARs, the FXR, the GLP-1, the FABAC, and FGF21, FGF19. And in the category of self-stress apoptosis, there's vitamin E and there's ASK1, right? And between inflammation and fibrotic remodeling, there is a CCR2, CCR5. Don't worry about all these. These are just basically code names for drugs that are in development, right? And the antifibrotics. And because NASH leads to liver cirrhosis, all the interventional drugs that has been approved or the therapeutic targets are being looked into with all these different code drugs. Okay, let's look at FGF19 and FGF21 analogs, right? They have shown to be promising in the treatment of NASH. Right, so the FGF is a family of proteins that regulate the reproduction, the development, and the metabolism. So FGF21 binds to the FGF receptor 1C and FGF receptor 2C, and so on and so forth. And they all, these binds and those will bind to FGF receptor 4. Don't worry about the technicalities. I'm just trying to show you in the presentation. These are the things that the startup would present. All right, so this different drugs in development takes, for example, the FGF21. It increases insulin sensitivity and it redirects calories from the liver, right? For FGF21, it also reduces the LDL, ApoB, and triglycerides. And in bile acids, it is the FGF19 that decreases bile acids. What decreases inflammation and fibrosis is the FGF19 and FGF21. What decreases fat and lipotoxicity and the oxidative stress is the FGF19 and FGF21. Busy slide again, but just trying to show you that FGF1 on the left side and FGF19 in the middle, they can affect metabolism when infused directly into the brain. However, it is currently unclear to what extent they cross the blood-brain barrier when it is peripherally administered, and whether the concentration that reaches the brain influences the whole body physiology. So for FGF21, it has been shown that in its central actions meaning the brain, contribute considerably to its pharmaco effects. But all three FGFs are thought to affect the whole body metabolism via the signaling in the WAT. But in addition, if you look at the middle, FGF19 also acts via the liver. Right. This slide shows FGF101, which is one of the assets of NeoFactor Therapeutics, the company. So FGF101 has metabolic effects of FGF21 and bile acid effects of FGF19. Right, so FGF21 versus FGF19, what are the benefits of FGF21? It has a longer half-life, so that weekly dosing is available versus a daily dosing. It's more improvement on insulin sensitivity and lipid levels. FGF19 increases the LDL, which is the on-target effect. Okay, what are the FGF19 benefits over FGF21? It is more improvement in fibrosis and liver fat in early clinical studies. So the right-hand side shows the combined features of FGF19 and FGF21 analogs. All right, I won't go through the rest. Look at this chart. NFX101. This is the drug that is in development, the asset. Reduces inflammation and fibrosis. Remember I said NASH causes inflammation and fibrosis of the liver that leads to cirrhosis. So NFX101 reduces inflammation and fibrosis in diet-induced NASH mouse model. So in the mouse model, you will find the yellow bar that you see is lowest in the NAS score on the left side. And the yellow bar on the right side is the lowest for fibrosis. So NFX101 reduces inflammation and fibrosis in the mouse. If you look at steatosis on the left side and inflammation on the right side. So NFX101 improves the NASH symptoms in diet-induced NASH mouse model. Again, it shows the yellow bar is superior to control and superior to FGF19 and FGF21. NFX101 improves liver function and fibrosis in the mouse model, right? ALT is a liver enzyme. AST is a liver enzyme. So if you look at the left-hand side, the yellow bar is lowest again with a liver enzyme of ALT. And the middle, the AST, the yellow bar is lowest again. And the fibrosis score on the right side, NFX101 is the lowest. So it shows that it improves liver function and improves fibrosis in the mouse model. Again, NFX101 reduces body weight and blood glucose in the mouse model. If you look at the left-hand side, the body weight, the yellow line is lower than the control, which is the gray line. If you look at the right-hand side, the yellow line is also very much lower compared to the gray line, which is the control, and FGF19, right? So it reduces body weight and helps in blood glucose control in the mouse model. NFX101 improves blood sugar and triglycerides. Triglycerides is one of the fats in the body in diabetic obese monkey, right? This is a study done in monkeys. So again, if you look at the left-hand side, triglycerides, the yellow line is way below the other three lines, especially the control and the FGF19. And the right-hand side shows change in blood glucose. Again, the yellow line, which is NFX101, is much lower than control and FGF19. Clinical development that was done in mouse and monkey, all right? Those are called preclinical. That means before it enters into humans. Clinical development plan, meaning going into the human body. So IND in the first quarter of 2020 means investigational new drug application. In the US, if you need this application, IND application, to move the drug from animals into humans. So phase 1 study, clinical study in humans, is done in healthy volunteers. The SAD and MAD, don't worry about that. I mean, it's like single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose. It's a dose ranging study for safety and tolerability, metabolic biomarkers. Then the phase 2A in biopsy confirmed NASH patients, right? Biopsy confirmed meaning a biopsy is done to take out liver tissue and to look at the liver tissue so that you can know baseline. So this is a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled dose-ranging study. 90 patients in biopsy confirmed NASH. You have to confirm that it is actually NASH through a biopsy. And 111 dosing at X milligrams, 3X milligrams, and placebo for 12 weeks, right? Meaning one group has X milligrams, another group has 3 times the dose, and the last group has placebo. So they look at primary endpoints, secondary endpoints. This is the result, broad pipeline of de novo hormones and cytokines. If you look at NFX101, from discovery to preclinical to phase 1, right? And NFX101 has moved into phase 1, which is human study. And the rest in the different areas like solid tumors and autoimmune disease, it is still in the discovery going into preclinical, which is discovery of the analog going into animals. Then they presented intellectual property, the IP, right? IP is very important. 5 issued US patents, 6 pending US patent applications, issued and pending foreign patents. Claims are related to the NFX101 product in these following areas that they have patented and made claims to. And this patent expires in 2030, from 2030 to 2033. These are the claims. Financing, they presented that they have raised 35 million in Series A in 2018. IND filing, meaning investigational new drugs going to humans, in the first half of 2020. They're looking to raise 50 million to fund their phase 1 study, clinical study in healthy volunteers, and phase 2A in NASH patients to look at safety and tolerability, dose finding, PK/PD stands for pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, the imaging, and the metabolic biomarkers. Right, so before I go into analyzing this presentation, which was made by a company, the NeoFactor Therapeutics, this is a startup company. They presented this to an investor. What are the strengths of these presentation material? And what are the weaknesses? So if you think back, those that have been presented, the content, the material that has been presented, the strength of the presentation is that they have highlighted features of their platform, all right, using a computers or in silico. They have outlined the unmet medical need in NASH, because currently there is no effective treatment for NASH. So they have said that it is an unmet medical need. They have provided a clear value proposition of the NFX101. And they have also characterized their lead asset, which is NFX101, with a head-to-head study versus other approaches in vitro. In vitro means in the test tube, in rodents, which is the mouse, as well as in monkeys. So those are their strengths. That's why I said do not worry too much into the scientific content, but they have put together the information in their presentation slides, characterizing all that I've said in terms of the strength. However, look at the weaknesses. Too much emphasis has been placed on in silico modeling. In silico meaning computational, right? Too much emphasis on in silico modeling over a real data. Real data means from the mouse, from the monkey, and of course, going into humans. There is no information provided in the deck, in the slide deck on CMC. CMC is the manufacturing, right? Chemistry, manufacturing, and control. The preclinical, which is animals, and the GLP toxicity data. There wasn't any toxicity data. There was no reference made to clinical validation of the targets that they were targeting. There was no dose response data. As they increased the dose in the mouse and the monkey, they did not show the data. There was no characterization of immunogenicity risks. There was no assessment of the competitive landscape. They did not show who are the competitors also developing a drug for NASH. The landscape, competitive landscape, wasn't assessed, or even if they did assess, they did not provide in the presentation. There was no assessment of the market opportunity, right? Besides a little bit about the US non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and NASH, as well as fibrosis, the cirrhosis, there was no assessment of the entire global market opportunity. There was no detailed timeline. There was no budget shown, and any potential exit options. Exits are very important for investors. So they did not show any potential exit options. There was no description of team members who are in the team of NeoFactor Therapeutics. And funding to date, there was no the detail elaboration on funding that they have to date, and the cap table. Cap table meaning who are the investors and who are the funders so far. So these are the strengths and the weaknesses of a presentation deck of a hypothetical company seeking funding. So what are actually the component and the important factors that investors are looking for? To make it easier, I have put it into an acronym called INNOVATE. Okay, let's look at the critical items to cover in INNOVATE. I, you need to look for the right and correct investors. Some investors have a focus on certain areas. So some have focus and mandate on certain geographies, whether they're global or they're looking into Asia Pac, or looking into US or just Europe. So you need to look for the correct investors. That is the I. Let's move to N. You need to show that there is an unmet medical need. Total addressable market, or TAM. The total addressable market of this need has to be shown to give the investors a feel of what is the market like? What is the potential for this drug to treat? How big is it? The other end, what is novelty in this technology and the target product profile? The novelty and the innovation has to be elaborated. Oh, who are your opposition? Who are your competitors versus the standard of care that is being used now? Well, for NASH, there's, of course, there's no effective treatment yet. But who are the competitors who are looking into the same area that you are looking? The opposition. V stands for valuation. The value to your patient, the accessibility, the affordability, and other ESG themes. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, which is coming very hot into the market and in investors' minds. The CMC, the chemistry, manufacturing, and control of the product. The pricing, the reimbursement strategy, the market share, the financial forecast, the operating expenditure, the CAPEX, the capital expenditure and profit that shareholders can get in terms of their returns analysis. This is to be shown. A stands for approval, the regulatory approval from FDA, for example, in the US, and the timeline of getting that approval, when, approximately, and the IP. T stands for teams, as I said, very important to show investors who are the people in your team. Can they execute? Execution is key. If you have a novel product, but your team is unable to execute, the whole deal can come into challenges and problems. Time and costs. Term sheet. Who has provided a term sheet? Capable to fund and to raise pre-money valuation and the use of proceeds. And lastly, E. Exit. How is the company potentially going to exit? Is it through an IPO or is it through a trade sale? When is it, the time, and the mode? So I've put the critical items to cover into the acronym called INNOVATE, and these are the components that has got to go into the presentation deck of any startup wishing to get funding from investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Timothy. I know when we think about innovation, we look at what companies are doing, and even as founders, we're always focused on innovation. Are we moving the company forward? That acronym is incredible because all of us do remember innovate, and now we can look at that in terms of when we meet investors, when we look at growth, and how to strive to really kind of push the company forward in terms of support and infrastructure. So thank you for that. In terms of growth, I guess my first question would be, when we're looking to grow, or if you're seeing if the idea is novel, often we look at how do we complement a certain sector, how do we grow 10%, 20% is considered great. As an investor, how do you view a business different from a good business for a founder versus maybe a good business to invest? Because I think a lot of companies and entrepreneurs may not recognize what a good business versus a good investment may be.
Right. A lot of founders, they're very passionate about their asset, whether they are scientists, having an asset that they have put together, or whether they have licensed in a very good asset, and looking at growth for the company. If a company is looking at 10% growth, that is actually what most people are doing. I think it is important to look for and have a mindset of moonshot, a moonshot mentality. So what do I mean by moonshot? It is 10 times, right? 10 times growth instead of 10%. That's what I mean by moonshot. So in the future, founders and business people, they need to have moonshot mindset, moonshot thinking, 10 times growth instead of 10%. And that is what investors are looking for. Moonshot mindset.
Understood. How do we balance that mindset in the sense that there's always a risk-reward scenario? And how do you have a moonshot mindset but ensure you're not taking undue risk, you're not being unrealistic with the market? Or do you need to be unrealistic in the sense that what you're looking at today should not be the market and the landscape that you aim to change and make it tomorrow?
So for investors, we need to actually do very detailed due diligence on companies and on deals that come through and come by. So that's why I say the team is very important. The team makeup, who are the people who are in the team, their experience, their passion, their energy and their drive, and their mindset, whether they, are they going just for the market or just a little bit above the market, or at least an aspiration for a 10 times growth. They may not reach a 10 times growth outcome, but the aspiration of reaching a 10 times growth trajectory is very important. And of course, in terms of any drug development or biotech development, it's always a binary outcome. Binary meaning is it approved or not approved? So it depends on the results of preclinical, then in animals, clinical in humans, and then the commercialization. So before commercialization, there is a regulatory approval. So it's binary, as I say. Risk comes at different stages. The earlier the investment, let's say in preclinical, which is the animal stage, the valuation of the company is usually cheaper because the risk is high. However, if you took that bet and they got their moonshot growth, the multiples are phenomenal. The later the investment, let's say in human phase 1, phase 2, or even phase 3, which is a regulatory approval, the valuation of the company is higher. It's more expensive because the risk is much lower at that point in time.
That leads me really well into my next question. So earlier in the week, we were actually talking to SG Innovate, and SG Innovate was speaking about how they're really pushing the ecosystem for growth. They've gone from digital health up to now medtech, biotech. We had NDR, we had Lucens talking about robotics and diagnosis. But we also had yesterday a session by Biosciences, one of the first drug development companies really based out of Singapore. My question is, how do you view drug development and the investment across that? Because like you said, it could be binary, And how do you manage that? And where does the team play a role, or possible outcomes, even if it's a zero? Where can that translate into? So how do you look at the drug development investment space in Asia around that?
Right. The drug development space within Asia, we need to develop that ecosystem, the biotech ecosystem within Singapore and, of course, within Southeast Asia. A study has been done. It showed that for this ecosystem to be built and effective, take Singapore, for example, we need about 50 to 60 assets ongoing at any one time in terms of the innovation assets. And we need like 2 to 3 exits every year in order for the ecosystem to be built and effective. And just to put some figures to that, the investment that will go into building this ecosystem in terms of Singapore dollars, we need to put in about 1.8 to 2.1 billion dollars a year. Sorry, it's the other way around. We need to put in 1 to 1.2 billion dollars a year to see a return of 1.8 to 2.1 billion dollars. And it's that kind of returns when we have built 50 to 60 assets at any one time and 2 to 3 exits per year. One of the challenges is to get talents, the proper talent in terms of drug development into Singapore and into this region to build the ecosystem. So talents are lacking. I'm not saying that we don't have. In Singapore, we have A-star, A-star scientists, for example. But we need to bring more innovation talents, say from US, Europe, into this region or into Singapore for a period of time to build that ecosystem. You were saying Om Biosciences. Om Biosciences is a Singapore-born company. It's a biotech company specializing, or rather focusing on immuno-oncology, cancer. And actually, initially they had like 1 or 2 drugs, like the case study. However, they have built their pipeline. They built their pipeline to, I think, about 10 currently. So with the increased number of pipeline products or assets, the risk in the company is much lower. And
Sorry,
Singapore...
Before you expand on that, I had just one question, because you mentioned assets and a pipeline of 10 potential drugs. When you were talking earlier about 50 assets to invest in, would then OM's items or 10 drugs in the pipeline be considered one investment, but in 10 assets? Or do you need to invest in 50 companies potentially and build the ecosystem up there? Just maybe a clarification on how you view their pipeline as investment.
Right. When I said 50 to 60 assets in Singapore, one asset is one drug.
Got it.
Yeah. So for OM to have like 10 in their pipeline, of course, at different stages. Yeah, some are discovery stage, some are at preclinical, and some are ready to go into human, the IND ready. This is a very good example of a company to look seriously into investing, because 1, it is a Singapore-bred company. 2, it has increased its pipeline, and 3, the team members, as I said, is very important, right? Team members, their experience, their drive, their passion is something that investors, when they do due diligence, they need to make sure that they are comfortable with the team, and whether the company is looking at just Singapore alone, or Asia Pac, or actually global. For OM, it is a global outlook, global aspiration. And I think I can say that they have a moonshot aspiration, moonshot mindset.
That is incredible. I think that theme of, even with the SG Innovate and their portfolio, we're always talking about, or they were looking at, the first assumption should be, how do we go global? Because in drug development and biotech, if you don't go global, no one market is large enough necessarily for justifying the returns and the investment that, and the risk profile of just the sheer sum of money that's needed on the research basis to get a product commercialized. So, you know, that reinforcement of the messaging, it really drives home the point that both yourself and others have been making throughout the week. I guess I would like to maybe wrap up the session with, of course, your key takeaway, but and the final thing before that would be on IP. Singapore is very trusted as a market, but I believe Asia is still growing its understanding of IP protection. China for sure, though whilst they're trying to support IP definitely in tech, it's I think the concept is more, if you're quick enough to grow and scale, it's your market, and there'll always be copycats. And the concept of IP is slightly weaker than, let's say, the protection that the West may provide. But drug development and medtech obviously is more of a global platform, not necessarily a region-specific go-to-market. So how does that role play in the whole fostering of the ecosystem, A, and B, kind of in other industries, when you get certain licenses, certain barriers are crossed, you get a higher premium. Are there elements here where IP will add to a company's valuation or the way you look and view a company?
Yeah, IP is part and parcel of investors looking into the company's assets, because we need to make sure that the investment is protected. And one of the protecting mechanism is that the asset is IP protected globally. Of course, it is a certain period of time. In drug companies, when they develop their drugs, the IP or the protection is 20 years from the time that first molecule is found to the time that you know, the IP is over. So
right.
It is part and parcel. It is important. If the IP is not properly done and properly obtained, it is very hard to invest in the asset.
Understood. That's a very clear message. Focus both on the research, but also protecting that research. So Dr. Timothy, again, I wanted to really thank you for your time and maybe ask you if you have any key takeaway message. I know the INNOVATE acronym was definitely there. I know the moonshot mindset. Would you want to reiterate that, or some key takeaway for all the attendees tuning in today?
Well, the key takeaway is, I guess, you know, it's important to build an ecosystem of innovators, of scientists, of companies that is brave enough to be started up in Singapore and in the region to make it big from Singapore into the world, all right, global. You need the courage, you need the passion, you need the drive of the team members. So whatever it is, the team within the company or the startup is very important. The mindset of growth is equally important. The aspiration, at least, as I said, moonshots. And if you do not understand what I've presented so far, just look at the last slide that says innovate. And that will give you the entire scope of what the investors are looking for in a startup company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Timothy. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for supporting Medical Festival Asia and, of course, Global Health Asia Pacific. Thank you for everyone attending in. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we will connect soon in person. Thank you, Dr. Timothy.
Thank you.